love and happiness. Yeah, something that can make you do wrong, make you do right.
All right. Would you please state your name as well as your age and how long you've been married?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, see if you get this right.
Okay, my name is Larry Johnson. I've been married for 25 years. I'm 65.
My name is Ife Johnson. I've been married for 25 years and I'm 60.
All right. Uh, this interview will be conducted with a series of questions based on relationships, religion, and social issues to give you guys a heads up. All right,
Okay.
let's begin. The first question. Most couples say they are married because they love their spouse. What do you think love is?
Want me to go first?
I
Um,
mean, go ahead.
I think love is probably best defined in Corinthians, where it talks about love being patient and kind and hoping for the best in all things and tolerating and and giving and sharing. I think love is being willing to sacrifice for the other, wanting the best for that person, sometimes even more so than yourself. Um, it's it's going above and beyond for um, someone who is willing to provide what they can for you. Um, it's it's something that gives you great joy, and sometimes great sorrow. Um, it's it's a commitment. It's something that you decide that is willing to work to have. Um, it's not always the fluff and the flowers and the music. It's sometimes getting through the nitty gritty and being there for each other as you go through that. Yes, that's Larry.
Uh, Ditto on all the above. But notwithstanding that, um, I guess I'm reiterating and echoing, you know, the, you know, some of the key characteristics of love, and one of the key characteristics, certainly from a Christian Judeo perspective, is that it is selfless. It is a form of selflessness. It is characterized by selflessness. Um, it doesn't have it doesn't necessarily have a expectation of I guess reciprocity, or having, you know, necessarily what you give is necessarily reciprocated. It does have an emotional as well as spiritual component to it. Okay, that's certainly borne out in all the scientific studies that brain waves change, you know, and so forth. Uh, but I think that those are some of the initial components of being attracted to a person. But when we start talking about, you know, love, uh, you know, the Bible talks in the context of the covenant relationship. It is a conscious act of choosing to, you know, to be with an individual. Um, so, I mean, that's kind of the way I see it.
All right. What will make love uh, last and help create successful marriages and stable marriages?
You,
Well, I'll go first. I, I think it's all those components that we talked about, about, you know, it's not that you suppress who you are, but there is a greater good, okay, connected with, the couple unifying to achieve common goals, to include a common goal of just staying together. And so, as part of those characteristics of selflessness, etc., I think your willingness to, support the other, you're willing to support each other, um, where sometimes it just doesn't make any sense. Um, and I think that um, being honest, or certainly at least authentic in your communication, I'm communicating, okay, to be, I'm never communicating uh, to put you down. All the things that there are always those components of selfishness because you're human, but you're constantly working, with God's help, you're constantly working at seeing the best in that person, even when they piss you off. Okay? But it's legitimate to say, oh, you've pissed me off today. Okay? And then trying to achieve some form of authentic communication, okay, to resolve disputes, to again achieve common goals, and it's just really a constant approaches to effectively seeing each other, and as well as communicating with each other. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, what makes it last? Commitment, I think, is a major component that you actually decide to stay. It was always a big deal to me to feel secure in what we've decided to do. That I never wake up any morning wondering whether or not if I leave the toothpaste tube open, or the salt shaker's on the wrong cabinet, or
wash the dishes or clean up your stuff.
Leave the shoes in the middle of the floor. But those are not going to be reasons for divorce. That we've decided that we want to be together, and that we've made a commitment to that. We don't walk on eggshells because of that, and that's a very good feeling, not walking on eggshells. But I can say something stupid, and your dad will still be there and still love me, and that sort of. There's the element of trust, and having lived a good part of our early marriage apart, that was a major component for us, that we both knew that we could trust the other person with our heart, and that we would be true to our vows, that I didn't have to wonder about, what he was going to be doing, or he didn't have to wonder about where I was going to be, or who I was going to be with, or any of that. We actually took our vows seriously, and we trust each other. I think there's a component of communication. We do a lot of that, and some laughter. There's got to be some days when you just laugh at all the mess that's there. I think people need to really understand that the vows talk about for richer and poorer, and sickness and health, and for better and for worse. That you're going to have all of those things in a marriage. And a lot of folks are there for the richer and for the better and for the health part. But when your spouse is sick, or you're the one who's sick, it's nice to know that that person's still there, and you're still there for them. And when tough times come, because tough times promise to come, that we'll still be together. And when it's the worst of times, or money's not flowing the way you want it to flow, that's not the reason to leave. Um, I think all those things are important components. And having an underpinning of faith, someone that you can pray with when times get kind of tough and you feel like, this is hard, having someone that you can go to God and get on your knees with them and feel like you've got the foundation to see you through. I think all of those are important components. And, but most importantly is making that commitment. I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to be there until you die. I'm going to be there. And I I can't think of anything short of death right now that would be a reason for us to leave each other.
All right. Can you guys give me an example of how your love has made your marriage successful, stable, and lasting? As well as some principles that you guys use to help.
I'll go first. I'll go first. Anyway. One of the things I can definitely say is this man has literally saved my life on at least 3 or 4 occasions. There have been times, uh, literally, when my health was at a point where I could have died and probably would have died had things been different by just a little bit. But Larry was there, and Larry was my knight in shining armor. He's been there, and he's protected me, and he's comforted me when I was brokenhearted, when I had great joys. He was there to celebrate with me. Um, when when I was afraid, he was there to make me feel safe and wanted and loved. And he has looked at me with those eyes that says that I'm still beautiful in his eyes, even though we've all, gotten old and wrinkled. Um, and he's worked hard to be healthy for me, to stay with me, not to leave me. On the flip side, he's a person I love. He's a joy, and I enjoy bringing him joy. I enjoy seeing his little smirky laugh and his little military ways. And he's been the most wonderful husband and a great father. We don't always agree on things. We fuss and we argue and disagree about a lot of stuff. But we can do that and still be together. And I guess that's just just an inkling of the many things and the many reasons why I love that man and want to stay with him.
I need you to restate the question again. It's not that I checked out, but I just need you to restate it.
Basically, can you give me an example of how, from the previous questions, you two have created a successful, stable, and healthy relationship?
Some examples. Okay, not being cynical, I think an example is we're still together, and we still find ways of, a mutual understanding, love, support. It's not contrived, it's not controlled. You're where you really want to be, and the word, you're where you want to be, and you're there, and you do all of those things required to stay there without, I guess, entering into martyrdom of your own personality. And I think that's really critical. And so, Yeah, I'll leave it at that. You do what you know, and this is certainly from a masculine point of view. And so, I've done the things required to, from my viewpoint, of demonstrating and implementing good headship. And that doesn't mean subjugation or draconian approach in our relationship, but being worthy of her submission to me as husband, which does not refer to her submission of herself and her being. So I've got to give her a reason to want to stay. And that's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily constitute, oh, let me give you, take this materialistic viewpoint. But that's also from a spiritual point of view, as well as a physical point of view, okay, and a mental point of view. Let me do the things, let me do the things for you that'll validate and substantiate, why I care for you, why I love you, why I want to remain with you. So, okay, that's my answer.
Compared to your previous marriages, how does this one compare? Like, how was the love different? Why was it unsuccessful?
Oh, there's no comparison. First time around for me, there was a lot of infatuation, a lot of feel good stuff, but when it came time for um, a real relationship, as I used to say, the thing that we had both most in common is that we both loved him best, and that left me in a situation where I was always walking on eggshells, where anything was a reason for um, a breakup and a problem, where I felt subjugated, where um, my wants and my desires and the things, my goals and ambitions were all secondary or tertiary, actually. Um, the things that he saw as important in his life. And none of those things worked really well. Uh, and he listened to everyone else about what our relationship should be, except us. Um, Larry is a point of security for me. I really know he's going to be there. I really know I trust him. I really know he loves me. I really know I love him. I really know there's a joy in being with him. I know we have a firm foundation together, that's spiritual and mental and emotional. And he's a great leader. All of the above.
Um, I mean, it's a cliche that there's a difference between, day and night. Are you there, Kamal?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Well, anyway, uh, the difference between my first marriage and this marriage is I absolutely didn't know what I was doing. Okay, period. Specifically, talking in terms of my duties and responsibilities as husband, lover, friend, etc. And it doesn't take, but I didn't understand, notwithstanding any issues that, with the other person, I didn't understand what it was. And I didn't take the time to be not just reflective, but to be taught, to be tutored, to be mentored. And it was only taking a second because there were so many signs that really wasn't the place to be. And if I had just stopped and taken a deep breath and just first looked at me and where I was and what I was, why did I need to do this with this person? And I didn't do that. I didn't have that conversation or the conversations that I had with your mother's father, okay, and other men around me, to include my own father, okay, about, okay, what is it about this person, that you want to really be with them the rest of your life, et cetera, et cetera. My first marriage, it was impetuous. It felt, the person was controlling, and I discovered later we had some really serious issues that I was not able and capable to deal with. I didn't understand what was in front of me. And so, but as Ife has already indicated, that I know that she'll be there. Okay, and not because someone is forcing her to be there, but because she wants to be there with me. And I didn't have any of that. I was in actual career competition with my first wife. She was envious and jealous of me, but that was some of those issues that she had that I discovered later were there. It wasn't an honest relationship, and as honest as people can be, but it started off with lies, and it just went downhill from there. And I just really wasn't mature enough to deal with the things that were in front of me. And maturity is not necessarily an age, okay? And I didn't really have the kind of spiritual foundation that I had by the time I met your mother that would have given me some perspective and answers. And I just didn't have the toolkit to pull from. I didn't have, and the support that I had or would have had to steer me in a better direction. I wasn't listening. I mean, that's what my father said. He was right. If you come to me and say, "Oh, I love this person, and I really want to be with that person," and there's nothing you can say about that person that'll have me not do that, then there's nothing for anybody else to say to you. So I really didn't place myself to be open for examination. And I think in a good, healthy family group, I think being open to examination about lifelong commitments like that is important. Anyway, but that's. And so the question for you is, are you open to examination? There's something for you to think about as you move forward. Because, as my father said, if it can stand the light of day, then it's okay.
Think about cohabitation, single parenthood, and illegitimacy in American communities. For example, the problem of violence in teenage pregnancies are beginning to manifest themselves in a kind of nihilistic destruction in the ghetto that is reflective of lost hope, low self-esteem, and the breakdown of the family.
That's huge. That's a huge open-ended question. That's a lot of stuff embedded in there. I mean, that's a question that talks to whether or not we have community and what the values are of the community. I know that in some Western countries, let's say for instance England, the rate of marriage has gone down and cohabitation has gone up. And I guess from it's more than just about cohabitation. It's about my willingness to make a commitment to you from a Christian Judeo perspective, and as well as a legal perspective. And so I think that sometimes within the context of everyday people cohabitating, I don't really end up having to make that commitment that includes life, body, limb, money, and everything else. But I think a formalized marriage arrangement, a confidential relationship, always says that I'm really, 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 really serious about being with this person. And I'm willing to put everything on the line to be with that person. And so the level of commitment, I don't think, is nearly as great in just simple in cohabitation. That doesn't mean that it can't be, but I'm saying in general. And reference all that other stuff with respect to crime and self-esteem issues. It's built within the larger context of the society. Much of that starts at home, and that's just now. This is a gross generalization. This is a real super gross generalization. But we communicate to each other first in the family unit about who we are and what we stand for. And then that translates in with community values, and the values of the group are translated in family. And when you don't have that component to be able to translate morals and values, that includes issues of self-esteem, okay? Or you can corrupt you can actually corrupt it in family. I don't know. I mean, that's such a huge question. But I think it's I don't know, help me out, Ife. I think that's really a broad question.
It is. And
that's really overly broad.
well, one of the things I immediately took offense to is the idea of illegitimacy. I don't think there's such a thing as an illegitimate child. The child should never be held accountable for the actions of the parent. And since Christ, actually before Christ, there have been the questions of whether or not, a woman had a child out of wedlock. And so I don't think we should ever use that term in describing children. Now, as far as cohabitation goes, I think that it's like people are trying to test drive a relationship, which doesn't work well. I think, I always was a true believer that you should have your place, I should have my place. We should see each other, and then, I go to my place, you go to your place. When we're ready to be in the same place, we probably need to actually make a commitment to be there. And if you're not willing to make that commitment, then you shouldn't do all the other things that go along with, with having a relationship that you aren't ready to commit to. It's like I used to say, you shouldn't have sex until you're ready to give up your life, or commit your life. And, because you can catch something that you can die from, create a child, or need to get married. And so if you aren't ready to have that level of responsibility, then you shouldn't be doing the things that cause you to have that level of responsibility. Cohabitation, and this worked well for some folks. But it also, to me, is cheating on the test, so to speak. You put yourself in a position where you want all of the things that marriage brings without any of the commitment that marriage requires. And I think in that regard, you kind of shortchange yourself. And what was the third part of it? It was cohabitation, illegitimacy, and
Single parenthood.
Pardon?
Single parenthood.
On single parenthood. Now, as far as single parents go, I have utmost respect for a single parent. I had the opportunity for about the first 3 years of our marriage of pretty much being away from my husband because he was stationed elsewhere, and having a child that I served as single parent for was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I'd never had a job where I worked as hard or loved as much. Um, but it was it it's an amazing amount of work to be a single parent. And so I don't think whether or not it's male or female, there are a lot of reasons why people are single parents. It doesn't have anything to do with not being married.
Right.
I certainly was married when I was a single parent. You know, but that doesn't have anything to do with the amount of work and effort that goes into that, or the commitment of the parent. I think in some ways, single parenthood keeps the child from some things. There's some things that only your father can bring to you, only your mother can bring to you. And that's not to say that I don't know a lot of people who've been single parents who've done a tremendous job of raising children and whose children have not come out to be outstanding people. Our president, basically, was the result of a single parent household. So you can't say that that's the only criteria, but I think there's some things that you miss in not having both parents available. But I certainly don't want to look down on the parents, on single parents because of the job that they have to do, because it is a tremendously difficult task. And I think if more people knew how hard it was before they entered it, they might think a little bit more about whether or not that was the time and place to do that.
What are we experiencing in African American communities today regarding family marriages and couples compared to how it was when you were young adults growing up?
I'll say that, well, to me, it's still rather broad, and this is a gross generalization, and as a way of preface my statement. But in general, the we have fewer good, we have fewer, I guess, cross-generational examples of what constitutes a good relationship and what are the what are the characteristics of a good relationship. So what I mean by that is that there aren't, uh, each successive generation doesn't have the opportunity to see good relationships modeled before them, and the reasons for that are myriad and complex. It's everything from uh, the breakup of centralized family groups. It's due to economics. It's not that people wanted to do that. It's institutional racism. It's just, it's a very complex situation. But by and large, from my viewpoint, what's happening is that people, the generation coming forward has fewer good examples of what constitutes good relationships. I mean, that's in a nutshell.
I think for some of the things, there there are a lot of things that we assumed when we were younger, that most folks would have mom and dads in the home, and that oh, hold on, oh, and that certain values would be standard. We all kind of thought Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best and all that kind of stuff was the typical American household. What we've come to find out, however, is a lot of what we thought was typical was not. Um, I was amazed when I got to college because I did come from the Cosby household kind of thing. Um, when I got to college and discovered how many of my peers did not come from households like that, how many of my friends that I even learned when I was growing up that I thought were in households like that weren't. I think a lot of what's happened in society is that we've given permission to discuss a lot of things that have been hidden. Um, and in discussing them, they become more acceptable, and more people have decided that they can use that as their role model, and it really has become more prevalent. But like I was saying, things like homosexuality have been were around in Caesar's time, but folks didn't really talk about it and weren't open about it, and so as people began to discuss it more, people began to feel a lot more comfortable in coming out of the closet, as they would say, or deciding to experiment with homosexuality, or looking at that as a lifestyle. I think the same thing has happened with a lot of things that have gone on in America. A lot of things that we used to think were unusual really weren't that unusual, but hadn't been discussed. And now that they're coming out, more people are looking at that as a lifestyle choice, whether it's single parenthood, whether it's abusive relationships. A lot of things that have been hidden are now accepted. So,
but not necessarily for the better.
not necessarily for the better. I think you just see a lot more of it, and so much of it is coming out with media and social media, and I think every generation tries something a little bit more outrageous than the generation before. Um, every generation has to have a point of rebellion. So our generation, they did hippie stuff, and we went all out with um, a whole Black Power movement, and um, your generation comes out with something to shock us, just like we did things to shock our parents. And so every generation has to come up with a new shock value. And I think some of that is part of what's happening in our society.
Adding to that, there was a certain level of rigidity and stratification with respect to value sets. Some of it was good, some of it wasn't so good. But everyone, because of that rigidity and stratification of behavioral norms, there was a great deal more compliance and conformity in behaviors. Now, all sorts of things may have been going on behind closed doors, but the outward appearances, everyone conformed to a certain agreed upon set of norms. And again, it's not making the time that we grew up so much better, but when we start looking at the characteristics of good, healthy relationships, and we start looking at what good self-image is, that values each individual and elevates. I'm seeing conversations, not just in media, but conversations and behaviors that don't elevate and celebrate. So I'll just leave it at that. And I think all of those things have had an impact.
All right, the next question is, what are the causes or origins of these social problems? Are they largely moral problems, as claimed by some critics? Or are they because religious meaning no longer permeates the everyday life of the individual?
That's asking the same question in two different ways, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, basically, again, as I started off the other question, there's just simply a myriad of economic, social, uh, psychological, environmental forces, uh, as we move into the 21st century, that's uh, that's having an impact on family constructs, what's agreed upon social norms and behaviors and social parameters. And so it's a little simplistic, to just simply talk about religious norms and so forth, because as we're seeing in, let's say in places like Great Britain and Europe in general, uh, we have an increasing, well, decreasing numbers of people who subscribe to formalized religious practices that universally, and this also applies to the United States, where people will say, oh yeah, I believe in God, but when we start talking in terms of formalized religious practices and so forth, we have a decreasing numbers of participants. And so I just simply think that just simply, a lot of factors from new technologies and integrating those technologies in society, new overall behavioral norms, boundaries being changed that we're seeing at play, and that we're constantly moving into new norms, and some of it is scary to people, and it's creating it's creating conflicts at all levels of society.
I think the question has an underlying assumption of Christianity. And when you start talking about deterioration of faith and morals, it sounds as though there's an underlying assumption that this is happening in the Christian church.
Or it could be ecumenical. I mean,
Yeah.
you could be
Yeah,
a member of Baha'i or
exactly.
Muslim,
And that's what I'm saying.
So it doesn't have to be Christianity.
But for some faiths, some of these things are becoming more rigid. Other faiths is becoming more lax. So I think a lot of it has to do with your faith and what you have faith in. And I know that we've gotten to the point now where the religious norms, let's say of the Muslim community, are frowned upon, because we say, you shouldn't be stoning this couple because they had sex out of wedlock, or they shouldn't be punished this way, or
some norms.
Yeah, some of the norms. Yeah, not all of them.
Right.
But some of them are frowned upon in an American society because it doesn't fit our current values. At the same time, depending on which branch of Christianity you are in, it's either very accepting or very rigid. I mean, so when we start talking about norms and values and faith and religion, that's way too broad a topic to sum up in any kind of general term. We all have faith. Everybody has faith in something. We have faith in buildings that we walk into, or else we wouldn't go in them. We have faith in chairs that we sit in, or we wouldn't sit on them. And part of what's happening is we haven't taught and passed on our faith to our children in the same ways that we've received it.
Well, some people would disagree with that.
Yes.
Maybe I have passed on faith in materialistic, approaches to life.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
so it's
depends.
just.
But I'm saying I think that with some things, I remember when I was growing up, it was unusual. You know, it really wasn't accepted for a woman to be a single parent. That was frowned upon by the church. The woman was ostracized by the church. Um, it got when we got liberal, it was when the child could be blessed in the church, but it was not during church service. It had to be after church. Now that's no longer an issue at all. Um, there's certain things that have been modified and have become more accepted over the years. But that's not true of every faith and every religion. Um, so I don't know how you give a general answer to that question other than, you know, from the standpoint of the religious beliefs that I've grown up with. Um, it's probably much more liberal than it was when I was a child. Um, and on some things less liberal than it was when I was a child. Uh, I think there's some things that got passed on, some things that didn't. I think there's some things that probably shouldn't have been passed on. Um, you know, you think about Moses in the wilderness and how an entire generation had to be wiped out before they could receive God's blessing. Um, and I think in some ways that's probably going to have to happen with some of our generation and the generation before us. There's some beliefs that we have that we've held on to, some things that we've had so ingrained in us in terms of how systemic racism has affected us, that I don't know that there's some issues that we'll get over in our lifetime. The fact that I saw a black president inaugurated is something I never expected to see in my lifetime. That's changed a lot of my viewpoints. But then it also has become very apparent in the last year or two that it doesn't matter what you do or how good you are, how smart you are, or how brave you are, or how bold you are, or how high you have risen in elevation in political life. If you are a certain hue and you fall into certain categories, you still are addressed the same way. And so, you know, that has been a disturbing reality for me as well. But I keep having hope that, you know, with another generation or two, things will change.
Though there are nevertheless obstacles that we face in America because of race, what can and should be done by us to solve some of the problems facing the nuclear family and marriage in our communities?
Wow. I think part of it is deciding to be committed to our families, um, to love unconditionally, and to pass on values to each other. Um, to for our younger generation to be willing to ask the questions and listen and learn, and for the older generation to understand the very different world that you live in. As Kahil Gibran would say, yours is a world we cannot visit, not even in our dreams. So the best we can do is to provide you with the best foundations we can, the best advice we can, um, the best support we can, and hope that you will grow to be the kind of young man or young woman that is required to make it in this society. So, you know, there is a lot of systemic racism, and we need to make sure that you understand what that is, so you recognize it when you see it. But by the same token, my father, who grew up on a farm in Arkansas, one of 9 children in a 3-room house, who went to school in a 1-room schoolhouse and rose through the ranks to learn to speak 6 or 7 languages and become a, a major national leader and all kinds of things of that sort, um, proves that it's not necessarily uh, overwhelming when we run into obstacles. In some ways, not having the obstacles, I think, has weakened us as a people. It used to be that we rose to the occasion because of the opposition. Um, of course, we all hope and pray that we'll get to a point where that won't be necessary anymore. But I think we also need to be realistic in understanding that we have a responsibility, regardless of the obstacles that are placed in front of us. And then still be realistic about knowing that those obstacles will be placed there.
And keeping this really short. What would it look like? And the only thing I have to say is that each generation has its opportunities with respect to teachable moments. And each successive generation ends up having to relearn the struggles and the histories and the meaningfulness of the previous generation. And so it's a continuous dialogue. It's a continuous cross dialogue about whose we are, where we came from. It's a continuous dialogue or conversation that we've got to get to, okay, that talks to freedom ain't free, that in order to get to the promised land, you've got to go through the desert. There's opposition. Evil never rests. And so it's about not being placated by materialism. That's really short-lived. It's about a willingness, to face the evil, that's in front of you, and dealing with the oppression that's placed upon you, with an understanding that everyone doesn't make it to the promised land. So that's what I have to say about that.
All right. And the final question. According to Newsweek of March 3rd, 2003, from schools to jobs, black women are rising much faster than black men. What are the consequences of this development for the marriage market, relationships, and family in the African American communities?
Makes you a hot item.
Well, that's another complex one. And we've seen that it's not a new phenomena, okay? It really isn't. And we've had multiple generations where it was more acceptable for the black female to be in the marketplace as opposed to the black male. And that's also another gross generalization. And so it's not that the black female needed to be in the household, but in general, I think it without the black female ends up having to carry too much of the load. There's an imbalance. There's an unfairness. It erodes the foundation at some levels of the family unit. The family unit isn't nearly as cohesive. It's not nearly as strong. And so, but all of this has evolved primarily because of how work is structured in this country in connection with race. And so, in many instances, and this is also another really gross generalization, that the black male was subjugated in ways that precluded him from necessarily having the earning power that he should have, could have, eroded his upward mobility. But since the advent of the civil rights era, well, also anecdotally, so many black males, certainly in my generation, when jobs begin to open, tended not to go to school. They tended to go to work because that was the ethos. Certainly within my family, go get that job. You can go to school later. And so when it was permissible, the in so many circumstances, the black female went to school. Then she joined into the workforce. That's another one of those very complex anthropological, sociological uh, questions, and it's just no simple answer other than the fact that we've had the same institutional racism, we've had the same skewed job markets, that's impacted uh, the African American community and really people of color in general, and it skews family norms, whatever that is. It skews the whole fabric of family. So, but anyway, so.
I think one of the things you'll see a lot more is you'll see a lot more interracial marriages. Um, as you have a shortage of black men,
Viable
black men
black
who are
men.
out there in the dating market, so to speak. You'll start seeing, I think, a lot more. In all honesty, a lot more homosexuality, a lot more women who are turning to other women.
Vast numbers of black males incarcerated.
Yes, when you start, even in my generation, we used to sit up and start doing the numbers. When you figure how many men have gone to war, how many men have been and homicide victims, how many men were incarcerated, how many men were drug addicts, how many men were already married, how many men were homosexual. It made a very small arena for dating for black women, especially black women who were educated and looking for partners with whom they would be somewhat equally yoked. I got lucky. um, but it's tough. I know so many well-educated, beautiful, wonderful, skilled, creative, witty black women who are alone because there's just no one out there that that's available to them unless they want to find someone who is way outside of their social economic norms. And so you'll find a lot more women who are either on their own or with folks from other groups. And I think that's going to happen more often. And in some ways, that may not be the worst thing in the world because that does a whole lot to uh, stem racism as well. But there are more people of color throughout the world than there are, folks who are not of color throughout the world. And I think folks are going to just start spreading their nets a little bit more. The world has become much smaller. You can date over the internet with someone who's halfway around the world. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that I think people will connect and start new ways of having family that we probably had never thought about.
And the operative word is viable mates. And it's just simply, again, just in general, the African American male increasingly becomes, in general, this is a gross generalization, becomes less viable for the upwardly mobile black female or the African American female. And she does indeed have options and choices. So that's it's a sad thought, but we may have left a generation or several generations in the wilderness.
And you're also running into a lot more women of color who are reaching that biological clock age and deciding that they want to be a mother, that they want to have children. And that's another reason for people to start thinking about single parenthood. They make good money. They're out there. They're
Don't need you.
yeah. Well, at least you start off thinking that. But trust me, you know, single parenthood is a tough thing to do. So that's my thoughts on that.
All right, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson.
You're welcome, Mr. Johnson.
And that concludes this interview. Thank you. Hi, how are you doing today? Can you please
I am
state
doing well.
your name as well as your age?
My name is Jamila Johnson, and I am 38 years old.
Are you married, single, cohabitating?
I am divorced.
Okay.
So I guess that'd be single, if that was your categories.
How long have you been divorced?
Uh, I want to say it's been 6 years. It'll be 7 years this December.
Okay. Just to make you aware, for this interview, I'll be asking you questions about single parenthood, illegitimate children, cohabitation, and religion. Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Here we go. The first question is, most couples say they are married because they love their spouse. What do you think love is? And on top of that, what are some keys to a happy relationship and or marriage?
I think love has a lot to do with sacrifice, and respect and acceptance. I think loving someone is accepting some maybe what you would consider the flaws about that person, accepting them the kind of the way that God made them versus the way that you could reposition them. Um, I think love has a lot to do with sacrifice, in the sense that whether you love your friend or you love your spouse or something like that, I think it's making those hard decisions sometimes when it's not always comfortable or easy, and offering the very best of yourself um, for the relationship, and then again having that mutual respect, in the sense that they respect who you are and accept who you are as well and are willing to do the same. So I think that has a lot to do um, with love, whether you're looking at a spouse or you're looking at family or you're looking at friends. You asked me a second part. What was the second question?
Um, what are some keys to a happy relationship and marriage?
I think the keys to a happy relationship and marriage is definitely doing all the same things that you all enjoyed maybe before kids or even before quote unquote saying I do. Still spending time to get to know each other, allowing the other person to grow and change because ultimately we all change and we mature and we learn lessons. And I think the most important part is communicating and willing to hear the other person out. And when you argue or when you have a disagreement, do it in all fairness, in the sense that, um, you know, don't, there is no such thing as, I don't believe there's such thing as, I didn't mean to say that. I think that, like the Bible says, out of the hearts, the mouth speaks of abundance. So the things that you say in anger, you don't get to take those things back. So I think communication and understanding and respect and being fair at all times has a lot to do with it and giving each other space and room to grow.
All right. The next question is, what do you think about cohabitation, single parenthood, and illegitimacy in American communities? For example, the problems of violence and teenage pregnancy are beginning to manifest themselves in a kind of nihilistic destruction in the ghetto that is reflective of lost hope, low self-esteem, and the breakdown of the family. What do you views on this?
I think cohabitation, a lot of people say they cohabitate because they want to get to know the person before they get married to it. But I think it's just an illusion because it's something about when people say I do, all of it changes. It doesn't matter if you've lived together for the last 10 years or you've lived together for the last 3 years. It's something about the permanency and the commitment of saying I do that changes the whole demographics of the relationship. So I think people choose to cohabitate hoping to get to know somebody, but I don't think they realize that, again, once that commitment kicks in, it changes because up to that point, you can always walk away without as many legal obligations. As far as illegitimate children or children born outside of marriage, um, I think I think growing up is hard enough. Even within a family, growing up is hard enough with the relationship with two parents trying to find your identity and trying to find out who you are. I don't think legitimacy or illegitimacy, children being born out of marriage, I think just single parent households, period, puts an additional strain and mental anguish on many young men and women because the other parent is not there and they're looking to themselves trying to see what part of themselves comes from that other parent, and if the other parent is even not around at all, then then it leads to an internalized anger, low self-esteem. You think things, you might have thoughts like, man, I must not really be any good because my own daddy doesn't come around, or my daddy left us, so we must really be bad children, or you know, my mom isn't here, she gave me up. I must have really been a loser. Even she gave me up. So when how do you combat those type of thoughts and issues when not only is the only parent there, maybe they're talking negatively about the other parent, but the other parent in their absence, there is no fighting back against those type of thoughts. So um, I just think that it just adds to the stress and the drama. um, I don't think necessarily it all has to do with marriage and the sanctity of marriage so much as the mental anguish of only one parent being there.
All right. The next question is, what are we experiencing in the African American community today regarding the family, marriages, and couples? Now, me and you are roughly 10, 12 years apart. Um, Compared to when you were growing up, how is this different than in today's society?
State the question again.
Okay. Um, in the African American community today, regarding the family, marriages, and couples, how is it different uh, than how is it different for the generation now and my generation compared to your generation when you were growing up?
The only difference, which might be a significant, I think my generation had grandparents. I think there was more of a family structure where there was actually an age differential where you had grandparents, you had grandmothers, you had grandfathers, and they were significantly older. Whereas your generation, a lot of the grandparents were still working. They were still working age. So that experience or that time of spending with your grandparents and certain traditions of ethnicity and things being passed down from one generation to another did not get passed. Having developing that respect for your elders and some things, I think for many students or many young men and women, they didn't get that because their grandparents weren't that old. They weren't 65 or 66 years old. Their grandparents were more like 45, 47. So I think that plays a big part as far as the way the generations relate to each other, and that experience and that wisdom. And so we call it common sense. I really believe that your generation does not have common sense. Common sense means there's a common value, a common system of values, and because that common system was not passed along, common sense cannot exist. That's the difference.
All right. Next question is, what are the causes or origins of these social problems? Are they largely moral problems as claimed by some critics, or are they because religious meaning no longer permeates the everyday life of the individual today?
Say the first half of that again for me.
Okay, I'll just repeat the whole question for you. That's okay?
That'll be fine.
What are the causes or origins of these social problems? Are they largely moral problems as claimed by some critics, or are they because religious meaning no longer permeates the everyday life of the individual?
I think it's. I know you didn't ask me. You only gave me one or the other, but I think it's a little bit of both. Um, if you're looking at the black community, a lot of our morality comes from our religious beliefs. What we consider to be decent, moral, things of that nature. A lot of that had to do with you growing up in the church. And even those who did not even attend church on a regular basis, they still had a certain religious respect for those who did, and the traditions of those faiths. I think that you do have the last two generations, my generation, your generation, that for a better lack of word, they weren't drug babies. And what are drug babies? Drug babies are babies that are drugged to church 5 days a week, all night, all day, on Sunday, 3 o'clock service, 4 o'clock service. And I think my generation and your generation did not have that. And so whether we wanted it or not, it was not instilled in us. And because those traditions were not instilled, I think there is a lack of morality, or at least a set of guidelines that we all operate by. And so without that, anything goes. And I think, like I said, it's a combination of both.
All right. The next question is, though there are nevertheless obstacles that we face in America because of race, what can and should be done by us to solve some of the problems facing the nuclear family and marriage in our communities?
Wow.
It's a very broad question. So, I mean, you can take it any way. You can break it down.
I know it, but it is a broad question. There's so many different aspects of it. Um, I think you have a lot of programs. I'm still a firm believer of community. I still believe that it takes a village to raise a child, and I don't think there's enough programs to do so. But uh, if more programs could be created to help um, the parents understand how to raise their children. And when I say that, not to say that they're bad parents or they don't love their children, but there is a disconnect on parenting skills and the patience and things that are needed, I think, to demonstrate good parenting to the children. I think that because our single rates are so high as far as single parent households, we have the highest percentage in the United States, that our young men, I'm one that firmly believes that a man can only raise a man. I'm not saying that women can't do a good job, but I truly believe that young men need that man influence, because only a man knows what a man goes through, just like only a woman really knows what a woman goes through. And if you could create more programs where there's more mentorship among women to young ladies, men to young boys, and again, having those older retirees and things of that nature make a connection with the younger generation to pass that experience of wisdom on, I think the whole community would fare better and benefit from those type of relationships. And I think that technology and what we call advancement has hindered a lot of that. So.
And the final question. According to Newsweek of March 3rd, 2003, from schools to jobs, black women are rising much faster than black men. What are the consequences of this development for the marriage market, relationships, and family in the African American communities?
Well, the consequence is of such. For so long, I mean, it depends on if you want to connect it back to slavery. It depends on if you want to look back at the last 3 generations or 4 generations, speaking in increments of 20 or 30 years. It creates the problem that, one, women do not feel that they can find a suitable mate. You have many women, I know quite a few professional women who will not date a gentleman who is not on the same educational level, and truthfully, those numbers are lower. And then, in addition to that, I think for so long, many of the African American men are challenged and held back in so many different areas that at times they feel inadequate to date women of a certain education level. Not to say that they feel inferior, but that constant power struggle, that constant breadwinner thing going on, it creates a rift. Even if they are able to overcome that long enough to get married, in long-term relationships, sometimes it still causes a rift, because again, men are raised to believe that they have to be the primary breadwinner, that they have to be the head of household, and it takes a very special man to get past all of that and understand the greater good of the family and things of that nature. And so, with women advancing the way that they are, many African American women I know are now dating outside of their race. Many of them have chosen career over marriage. And so while there's an increase of single parent households, as a group of people, the number of children that we are having is greatly diminishing as a race of people or as an ethnicity of people. And I think a lot of that has to do with career and education and separation of the man and woman, all, not just education but drugs and jail and all the other little factors that come into the picture. So I think that overall is having a devastating effect on the community as well.
All right. That was the last question that I had to ask, but I do have another question. Based on the conversation that we've had just now, you being a teacher at Eastern Shores Maryland University, do you see this on a daily basis? And if so, how bad is it, and what can be done to help the future and upcoming generation that's currently going to college?
The greatest thing that I do see that among the males and the females, But the greatest thing that I see that uh, perpetuates the issues of what's going on is that for whatever reason, there's an identity crisis. There's an identity crisis that I've identified because I not only teach the college students, like this summer I teach high school students. Sometimes in the summertime I teach middle school students. And there's an identity crisis. Not only do the children not know the history of their families, they do not know who they are, they don't know where they're going, and they're just kind of being moved along. And when I say that to say, I have college students, and I'm telling them that they can be entrepreneurs and they can be millionaires and they can have this life, and somewhere the efficacy level for them is not there. They've already accepted all the things that they can't be, or they look to their parents and say, well, my dad and my mom worked harder of their lives and they never achieved the levels that you're speaking of. So when you talk about how can this change, I think our young men really need to be influenced again at an earlier age on what it means to be a man and what it means and who they are as a person, so that by the time they get to college, they know who they are. They know what they're going after. They know maybe what their 5-year goal is. And I think that would save them a lot of heartache and pain, maybe save them a lot of money as far as those additional years of college because they didn't finish in 4. But I think that would help them tremendously. And it's not just the guys, that would go for as the young ladies as well. So.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Ms. Johnson. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for helping with this project.
You're welcome. You're so welcome.
And I look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
All right. Can you please state your names, your age, and how long you've been married?
Amber Malvin McIver. I'm 39 years old, and this is,
How long have we been married?
oh God, almost 18 years.
18 years, September 1st. I'm Krishna McIver, and I'm 42. Been married. Oh, do I include my first marriage?
Next question, Kamal.
Okay.
All right. Most couples say they are married because they love their spouses. What do you think love is? And what are some key points to having a happy relationship and a marriage?
Obey your wife.
A sense of humor
Yes.
is a key point of a happy relationship.
Honesty.
Being with your friend, somebody you can always talk to no matter what, and not afraid to tell your deepest, darkest secrets or what you're currently feeling.
And probably the most important part is trust. If you don't trust a person, it's never going to work. So I think trust probably ties into everything. So if you trust a person, you're probably more than likely to be honest. You're more than likely to be vulnerable. You're more than likely to be, just in general, just open. So for me, I would say trust.
All right. The next question is, what do you think about cohabitation, single parenthood, and in American communities? For example, the problems of violence and teenage pregnancy are beginning to manifest themselves in a kind of nihilistic destruction in the ghetto that is reflective of lost hope, low self-esteem, and the breakdown of family.
Well, personally, I don't see that it's not a new phenomenon. When we were growing up, I know I had a lot of friends who were single parents in high school when I was growing up.
Grew up as single parent.
No, they were. I had friends who were pregnant in high school.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm a product of a single parent environment because my parents got divorced when I was 3. and I was primarily raised by my mother. I think that had an effect on me, mainly because I was always, wanting my father to be there. I didn't have that male figure to nail things into me like, no, girl, you're going to do it this way. I had my mom going, oh, well, we'll get it together. She was hard at times, but she was nice most of the time, and I needed that male figure. So I think it's very important for males or females to have a two-parent household at all times. What do you think?
I say yes and no. Two-parent households, I think, is the best ideal situation, but I've seen situations where, and I guess it's, what do you define as a two-parent household? Because can it still be a two-parent household if the parents are living together, but still have a relationship with their kids? And even if they don't live together, but they still have a relationship with their kids, I think it can work if the parents are willing to do what it takes. And I think it's probably a little bit more difficult in that situation. But I think the biggest part that kind of hurts the community in terms of single parents and having kids who are products of that not being, as successful, or maybe having a little bit more of a challenge, or whatever, how people perceive it, it's easier to do things if you have more support. So if you have one less piece of support, logically it's a little harder. It's going to be harder for a person to do well. So people who come from I'm a product of a two-parent household, so that's all I know. And honestly, nobody in my family has ever been, as far as I know, in my immediate family, has ever been put in that situation. So I'm pretty foreign to understand that. But the folks that I know have been in those situations, lots of times a lot more mature, have sometimes a much better perspective. So I don't think it's all negative. I just think it puts a lot of more emphasis and pressure on the kid, and either those kids step up or they don't. And I think that's where it really comes down to.
Okay. The next question is, experiencing in the African American communities today regarding the family, marriage, and couples, are they the same values and ethos in your generation as well as the upcoming generation, so your kids' generation?
Are the values the same? You're saying?
Yeah, and if not, how are they different?
I think they're just. I don't think the values. I think everybody's values have been pretty much the same. I just think how those values are applied have been different, at least in my opinion. Because everyone talks about the old days being so much better, but people were being raped and pillaged and beat up and all those things back then. So I think in the end, everyone really cared for each other, loved each other, and wanted to provide for their families. Because I think my gut is, I think everyone's value is basically, core values, you just want to be able to do what it takes to raise you, provide for you and your family. Now, how you go about doing it is a different thing. So I think the values are the same. I just think the vehicle and the means by which people do it are different. So that's my opinion.
Yep, I concur with what Krishna is saying. People have the same. I feel people have the same values, but it's just a way of getting there. We want to provide for our children. We want to make sure that they're getting to college so they can have a better life for themselves. And I feel that they will do the same thing, just like our parents wanted the same things for us, and our grandparents wanted the same things for their children. Everybody wants the same thing. It's just society is revolving is moving a little bit faster, and we're more connected via email and Skype and things like this. So we can really connect a little bit more, and everybody's just able to see everybody and connect with everybody. So it might have seemed like people's values have changed, but I don't think they really have.
All right. The next question is, what are some causes or origins of these social problems? Are they largely moral problems, as claimed by some critics, or are they because religious meanings no longer permeate the everyday life of the individual?
What?
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think. I think back. I mean, growing up, when I was like in elementary school, we said a prayer in class. You know, we pledged allegiance to the flag every morning. Kids knew what they were supposed to do and how to get there, and you walked in a straight line and you did what you were supposed to do. Nowadays, kids don't have that. They don't have, you know, we're going to have a prayer in class in the morning to make sure that we're all on the same page. And you know, and I grew up in it was specifically like when I was in Ohio. Yeah, we had Jewish kids, we had Muslim kids, we had Catholic kids, we had Baptist kids, we had Protestant kids, all in the same class. We all said a quick little prayer and moved on about our day. Nowadays, I think people just want to make everything so in a box, and you don't want to think out anymore. And help me out here. It's it's a little bit social, but I think that people need to relax a little bit. You know what? Need to relax with as far as religion and when we had a little bit of religion in schools and around people all the time, I think things were a little bit better for people.
See, I think the reason why people are like this is because for the longest, and if you look through history, religion was a means by which people were influenced to do certain things and accept certain things. As things have evolved, more and more information is available to more people. So I think people question everything now because it's including religion, and because of that, because they have information that they didn't have before. And honestly, some of the realities of what people are, I'll give you a prime example. The Catholic Church is a prime example. There are a lot of people that obviously, and continue to really believe in what the Pope, tells them to do. But when you're seeing emails, you're seeing blogs, you're seeing on television, you're seeing all these things saying that the Pope is allowing, priests to molest kids knowingly, it really destroys the faith that people may have in those type of institutions, and they question it. And then people are going to start searching and looking for other means to kind of answer those questions. So the religion part is, I don't know if it's the religion's fault, is the lack of religion is the reason why people don't have the same values. I think it's because there's so much information now, and not just, when I say information, that doesn't mean it's correct. That means it's right. It doesn't mean it's accurate, but it's so much information out there that you really don't even have to take a stand on anything. You can just kind of, if it's not what you like, you can go block something else that will say what you do like, and then you never have to really be challenged in that sense. So because of that, there's no parameters for a lot of people, and people think they can pretty much do what they want. But I was raised in a way that you can do anything you want in life, but you can't do it all. But people in this world now think they can do it all, and that's just not the truth.
All right. The next question is, though there are nevertheless obstacles that we face in America because of race, what can and should be done by us to solve some of the problems facing the nuclear family and marriage in our communities?
What was the last part?
What was the last thing you heard?
The last sentence that you said.
Okay, I'll just read the whole thing again.
Okay.
Though there are nevertheless obstacles that we face in America because of race, what can and should be done by us to solve some of the problems facing the nuclear family and marriage in our communities?
I think number one is stop making excuses as a race. Hold ourselves accountable for not just what's going on, not just what influences our community from the outside, but what influences our community from the inside. Secondly, I think another piece of part that would really help in terms of making things better, in terms of, you know, as a race, would be to surely understand what the real issues are on certain things, and understand that in the end, even though you and I may disagree on a certain issue, that should be welcomed in our community. I don't think everybody should have to think the same. You know, for anyone to think that all black folks need to be Democrats and not be Republicans or independents or whatever, libertarians, whatever it may be, I think is wrong. I don't think that should be right, because, you know, I think we're very vast and diverse, and I think we need to accept that. And if we accept that and understand that, I think holistically we would be able to evolve a lot more, interact with other folks more, and maybe look at things from different eyes versus, you know, always reacting to, you know, thinking that someone's attacking us, or, you know, not allowing us to do certain things. And that affects not only our day-to-day life, but even our households. And I think if people do that, I think all those institutions, I think, would be a lot better. So that's my opinion.
For me, it's, you know, helping out one another like a true community used to. You know, before we had when there was segregation, you went to your black doctors, you went to your black lawyers, you went to your black pharmacists in your community. People were more apt to helping each other out. We don't do that anymore. We don't network anymore. We don't say, hey, you know what, my kid over here needs a summer job. Do you know somebody who can help? A lot of times people don't do that anymore. It's, you know, you might get your close-knit circle of folks who might do that for you.
Especially economics now.
Right, but you know, it's hard to say, okay, this kid over here is going to need my help. Let me pull him over to the side and say, this is what we can do for you. What do you need? What do you need to be successful? People don't do that in the African American community. You know, they might do that in the Latino community. They'll do it in the Asian communities. They do it in the Jewish communities. They were not doing it in our community, and we need to do that more. I mean, I was just talking to a coworker yesterday, and it was like, we need to get a group together, people this week, and interact and mingle and network within ourselves, you know. And it doesn't mean that, you know, I have to make $100,000 a year to be in this community. No, it means, okay, I see this brother over here, he needs help, he needs a job. Who do I know who's hiring? Let's pull everybody up, you know, not just, okay, for me, it's us. That's what we need to start to do.
And we also need to get folks out of our business, because it seems like our community's issues, challenges seem to be out there all the time. And I think we allow that to happen. But other communities have similar issues, and I don't think it's out there as much as ours are. And I think it's because of our makeup. We tend to want to express ourselves and bring attention to certain things. And the black community is very trusting in that sense, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. And I think we suffer for that. So.
The last question is, according to Newsweek of March 3rd, 2003, from schools to jobs, black women are rising much faster than black men. What are the consequences of this development for the marriage market, relationships, and family in the African American communities?
You're going to have a group of women out there who, because the person that should be their mate isn't as economically stable as them, or educationally, you know, stable as they are, not going to be willing to deal with that man. He's a good man, but, you know, because he's not here, you know, he might be here, but he's not here with you. Sisters aren't going to be willing to deal with them. You know, they'll be like, oh no, you need to do something to build yourself up. I'm 25 years old. I got a Benz. I got my own house. I got this. I got that. What are you doing? You know, so, and they'll be more apt to go to another race who the men are doing that. You know, a lot of our young men are in jail right now when they should be in college. You know, knock on wood, my children will never have experience that. They'll all go through college. They'll all do exactly what they need to do. And they'll reach those higher echelons of women. You know, and the same thing for men. You know, there are some women out there who are just here, and they're here, but they have a tendency to try to bring them up. The black women need to start to do that. Otherwise, we're gonna lose black couples like we have. You know, I see it all day long. You have white men, black women, just like you see black men with white women. I think it can potentially really damage our community.
I just think it's just going to change the dynamic of things. I mean, to me, I just think it's a natural way of things because the truth of the matter is, black women have been known for, you know, hundreds of years to do what is necessary to provide for them and their family. So what I think is going to really happen is, number one, Amber's right, women are going to open up their horizon to look at other options to fulfill those needs. And brothers are going to have to step up, and if they don't, they don't. But the dichotomy of a family, and I'm just going to use like the Latino community, for example. You know, the Latino community is notoriously known for, you know, there being, you know, very close-knit, the father having, you know, a lot of authority. And, you know, the wife has authority, but there's a clear hierarchy of who makes the decisions. And it's not every Hispanic family, but it's just kind of ingrained in their culture. And I think that's similar for the African American community, but I think women have a much more stronger role in our family in that sense, and in terms of, you know, women being able to be outspoken and be able to express their opinions, everything else, and because everyone says it's nothing like a strong sister, and sisters, known as being very strong. But the problem I think is coming up is that I think for women is that they're going to think that they're men, and they're not. Just because you're making more money, just because you can provide for yourself, doesn't mean that you're a man. You're a woman, you're a lady who is doing that also. And I think that's where things are kind of getting screwed up, where people are equating how much money you make as giving you the power within a household. And in my mind, I don't think that's the case. I think there's, you know, you still have roles for a man, you still have roles for women in a household. Now, sometimes they go back and forth, and it can kind of be, you know, I've seen couples where the woman is the enforcer and the man isn't. You know, I've seen it vice versa. Huh?
Are you the enforcer?
I don't know. But I think that's the part that's really hard is I don't think women doing what they're doing is really hurting guys, men. I think it's helping them to step up. But I think what's hurting women is that they're trying to fill all these roles, and they're not going to be successful doing it because they're not men. You know, they're just not. And then unfortunately, they're doing all these things because men aren't men. They don't want to take on those responsibilities. They just want to kind of just act like they are and say they are, but then not really do what it takes. So.
Well, then that'll be a vicious cycle of going back to, you know, women being the head of the household and saying, okay, I want a child, but I don't need a man, so you have the single parent household, which, you know, you'll have your illegitimate children, you have this and you have that, and then it'll turn into a vicious cycle where you'll have, you know, young ladies saying, well, mama did it on her own, she didn't need him, I can do the same thing too. And that's gonna put pressure on our young men.
Because I can tell you this, I've never heard a man say, I don't need a woman. I've heard women say they don't need a man. And I think, you know, women being successful, and honestly, people act like it's just happening in the black community. It's happening in all the communities. There's a possibility for a woman to be president of the United States in the next, you know, few years. So people don't understand that there's an evolution going on where as women have more opportunities as they didn't have before, just like it was for African Americans when they were coming up, women are going to find out, wait a minute, I can do this and I can be successful at it, and they're going to do it. And that's just the way it is. So I don't think it's just occurring in the African American community. I think it's evolving throughout the United States and the world. And we're just riding the same wave. It's just that it's hitting our community a little differently, and the issues might be a little different. But, I mean, the reality is women have more opportunities now than they ever had, and women are just as capable as men in a lot of ways, you know? So it's just the way it is.
All right. Thank you for your time. That will be the end of my interview. I hope you guys have a good night. Thank you very much.
And you better get an A on this. All right, see you later. Come on.
Bye.
Bye-bye.